It is very hard to sustain yourself on being reactive and crazy. Being reactive and crazy is a very difficult headspace to live your entire life in. Today my car broke down. Clap if you're surprised. But it broke down worse than it normally does, actually. I was driving out of my neighborhood. I got like about a mile away, maybe a little less. I could feel my engine rumbling. I felt like I was in a dream for a minute. I asked myself, are you high right now? Because something just felt not right. And while I was accelerating, something was off. I could tell something was off, and then check engine light starts. And so I pulled off on the side of the road and threw my hazards on, and my phone was dead. So I walked home a mile. I was surprised with myself that I barely reacted to this admittedly very scary car problem. And I got home, I locked myself out. I did cry. And I pulled up our apartment complex's recycling bin. I cut a little hole in the screen window, pulled it, opened the window from the inside, and then I went head first into our tub. I bruised my elbow. You probably can't see it, but I can feel it. This is actually not the first time I've done this exact thing. In my freshman year of college dorm, I also did this head first through the bathroom window. And aside from the brief crying intermission, which I think was somewhat warranted for the events of the last several days, I'm also getting over a really bad 36-hour sickness, and I'm home in the holidays, and chaos ensues. Yeah, other than that, I was very surprised at the ease with which I handled all of these situations. If you talked to me any time before the last 6 months or so, I probably would have described myself to you as very neurotic and very reactive and crazy. I want to make it clear when I'm talking about being reactive and crazy that if you're reactive and crazy like I am, you're not actually crazy. This is being said in jest. It's my shorthand for a certain mode of being that I sometimes embody, reactive and crazy. It's this sort of heightened state of urgency that I get myself into, and heightened state of neuroticism, where the length between my impulses and my actions are short. For a long time, I haven't really put any kind of rein on this reactivity. Mostly because I have some, sense, and I tend to not blow up my life with my reactivity. I tend to still act with some measure of sanity, so I haven't really seen the point in reining in the reactivity. I don't really yell at people. I don't super blow up. I don't, usually, fuck up my life. I think that I've really associated becoming non-reactive with becoming passive. A lot of the advice that you'll get all around you, from people in your life, from, online, from the books you read, the movies you watch, everything, all of this advice towards young women, a lot of it is to rein in your passivity, to take a more active stance in your life and in your relationships. And I think I took that very, very to heart at a young age, and I think it's been, for the most part, really great for me. God knows that the average young woman can afford to take up a lot more space in her own life. I guess I don't see a lot of advice on how to do the opposite for the rarer cases of women like myself who maybe learned to take up a lot of space at a young age and didn't really struggle with that. In the place of being very passive and the fears that I've had that surround being passive, I've grown really reactive as a kind of a knee-jerk defense against it. For the most part, I associate not reacting immediately to my emotions with suppressing my emotions. I don't think I've ever understood until recently the amount of power that you regain by letting your impulse run its course and dealing with whatever the issue is or perceived issue after that impulse has already crested and come down. I don't think that I realized, because I, wasn't actively blowing up my life every time that I acted on impulse, I don't think I realized how much of my own power I was surrendering, how much agency For instance, if your impulse, if what comes up when you're tasked with something really scary, of course your impulse is gonna be, I can't fucking do it. Oh my fucking god, like this shouldn't be happening to me. But you can know that you're not gonna be getting anywhere. You're not going to be solving your problem while you're still in the headspace of this problem shouldn't even be happening in the first place. I'm not equipped to handle it. I shouldn't have to handle it. Fuck this. I'm out. That tends to be the state that I'm in when I decide I'm going to react to the problem. I tend to think that everything needs to get solved now. Right now. That way it's off my plate. It's out of my realm of consciousness. I'm not going to be sitting anxious about it. Yeah, and I start getting very, very urgent. It's this inflated sense of urgency. It's like it needs to be handled now. And so it needs to be handled now while I'm still in brain hell mode. First being faced with the issue and feeling like a deer in headlights, just frozen AF. And I think that's what I mean when I say that you surrender your power and your agency if you're acting from the middle of the impulse. I mean, we know that we all have our own particular fight or flights, whether your impulse is to freeze or to fight or to flee or to fawn. There are so many. And some of us react in one way every time, and some of us, we just have a, collection of not ideal impulses that pop up when we're tasked with a problem. I tend to freeze or run. No, that's not true. This is like a whole different video. In relationships, I tend to fight. In personal problems with like money or my car or my job or whatever, I tend to freeze and or run. If it's like another person, I feel like my reactivity usually will lead me to aggression and defensiveness. And in more, I guess, material matters, stuff that involves another person less, my impulse tends to be forget it's happening, like push it out of your brain, like avoid it. I used to I wouldn't check my bank account, wouldn't check my grades until like the end of the semester. I used to leave my check engine light just on there until my car broke down. This time I really did try. I guess I didn't realize until recently, and why I realized this recently, I honestly couldn't tell you. There wasn't one specific realization that brought me to this, is that I can still acknowledge these feelings and impulses in me and not suppress them and not drown them out, and still sort of be here in this seat of consciousness where I am just observing and I'm not so attached and wrapped up in the rise and fall of each emotion and each impulse. I can kind of sit and observe and see it start up, based on whatever triggered it, and watch what happens. Watch as I start breathing heavy and fidgeting and feeling like I'm itchy, when I snap at somebody, or I start panicking and I start getting, one-track mind, solving whatever my issue is, reacting to it in the moment. And kind of sit and watch and see what it is that my impulse is telling me to do. To yell at somebody, to avoid a situation, to jump to the worst possible conclusion. I just observe it. And it doesn't die inside me, which I think was the fear that motivated me towards reacting on every impulse. The fear is always that I'm going to let this shit slide. I'm gonna let this get repressed in me. I need to act now so that I don't betray myself. I don't betray my true feelings. Now I see it the other way. I see it more as a betrayal to act on that first impulse and to have that turn into something I didn't want it to turn into. To act out of character, I guess. I see this neuroticism and this reactivity now as just one part of myself and not really who I am. It seems flexible, fluid, subject to change. I don't react, consistently one specific way. These aren't things that I want to prolong and make a bigger part of myself by identifying with them and wrapping them up into my ego, my identity, my personality. I am sometimes reactive and crazy. I am sometimes very level-headed and patient as well. I feel now that there's a lot of power in being able to say, you know what, I'm gonna give it some time. I'm gonna trust that things will work out in some manner, even without my interference in this moment. I'm not gonna let how I feel and what I want fall to the wayside, and I trust myself to advocate for myself and take care of myself in the way I'm afraid I'm not gonna be taken care of. So I don't need to try to get my need for certainty or for resolution met in this exact moment. It'll get met. It'll get met when it's time. It's not time yet. The problem just arose. You can't even see it for what it is until you're over that wave of emotion, of impulse. There have been times in my life where I've gone through something very, very intense that has prompted me to, I think about it so obsessively that I start thinking about my thinking. And I've found these periods of time that are honestly very miserable and difficult to deal with the constant obsessive thoughts and the constant reactivity and whatnot. I find them to have been really illuminating, because sometimes that's what it takes for me to be able to really look at my thinking and the patterns that my thinking takes. Yeah, I've done a lot of observation and have started to feel this sort of distance from my thoughts, distance from my first impulses in reacting to a situation. It just doesn't feel like me. That's who I am. I'm neurotic and crazy. So it would totally make sense if I jumped to some wild conclusion in this argument with somebody and accuse them of doing or feeling something that they don't actually feel, wrapping it all up in my own self-worth and setting them really on edge. The relationships are just a specific thing I'm using as an example. There's a lot of other things that I react quickly to, but I think that being reactive in relationships is especially damaging to yourself and to the other person. Yeah, and there's been a lot of instances where I have sort of journaled on it or sat and watched it, in meditation, and seen these certain conclusions I always jump to, and these assumptions that I have about my own reality that just keep showing up in every spiral that I fall into. I find that the spiral can only really go so far now. There's a certain point where I can tell I'm thinking just to think, and I'm not getting anywhere closer to solving the issue. And so then I suppose the challenge would be finding a way to delay your reaction in facing a problem to the point where you can think a little bit more clearly, but then also not going too far down that way and waiting to solve this problem, thinking yourself into a spiral on how you're going to solve it and ultimately avoiding it by doing so. That's the challenge that I find is difficult for me. I've been able to combat the overthinking by being very impulsive. In some ways that works. Gives you a lot of good stories, for sure. Makes you pretty fun to be around, but also can be a bit off-putting and scary in instances of conflict with other people around you. Then on the inverse, I am starting to get a lot better at just doing whatever it is that needs to be done, whatever thing I'm avoiding, because I know the avoidance spiral will only continue. If it gets to a certain point where it's like, okay, I've had enough time to think about this, any further thinking before I take action is just going to be rumination. No problem solving is being done. That's my challenge now. I feel internally that I've calmed down a lot in the last 6 months for various physical, mental, and spiritual and somewhat circumstantial reasons. This is my specific challenge. I always say, this is my lot in life, is you're gonna be born with this certain set of circumstances, of talents and graces and wonderful charms and parts of your personality and certain aptitudes for things, and then you're also going to have these insecurities and soft spots and traits that you need to work on and might have to struggle with and contend with your whole life. Some of them it's like one at the expense of the other, or there's a good thing with a bad thing tied to it as well. And so I mean, I think that my assertiveness and confidence and boldness and these things also come with the flip side of, you know, they'll get me really far in life in some ways, but the flip side of that would be, you know, aggression and defensiveness and sort of being cagey and protective of myself in a certain way. That's the other side of it to work on. You can be really contemplative and meditative and have this sort of awareness of your thoughts that you ultimately articulate into art, writing, you know, things that connect with other people. There's certain, like, I don't know, metacognition. You can access your thoughts in this certain way and translate them so that other people understand them and other people connect with them. And that's another wonderful trait to have. But on the flip side, you might suffer from bad overthinking and OCD, thought spirals, and points where you have gotten so wrapped up in your own head that you are having difficulty differentiating what's smart and makes you sound really smart and self-aware and what makes you sound reactive and crazy. So this is my lot in life, is that I have to contend with being reactive and crazy. But I don't know if it'll be a lifelong battle. I seem to have taken a different seat at the table than I was in previously. I think I'm observing in a way I wasn't before. I wonder why.